Hi sir, this is Barko from CSE department. My register number is 2202018057. My tech talk topic is disaster management cycle. Introduction: the concept of disaster management cycle had entered disaster management efforts over the past few days, especially since the Yokohama conference, Yokohama, Yokohama conference. Although disaster management had been perceived as a short-term relief undertaking, which lasted till some time after disaster. Other prospective activities undertaken in the pre or post disaster stages on the part of civil society of the government towards mitigation the impact of disasters or tackling long-term vulnerabilities and dealing with newer threats in the wake aftermath of a disaster were not included in disaster management activities or social action on the part of civil society, rather classified development activities or social action on the part of civil society actors motivated by philanthropic concerns. Disasters and development. Another significant consequence effect of this concept relates to understand the inherent correlation between disasters and development. Development had proceed with relative concerns of environmental issues. The result has been newer vulnerabilities arising as a result of direct consequences of development strategies. For example, air pollution has been caused due to uncontrollable emission of greenhouse gases, water pollution due to unregulated working of industrial enterprises, as also agriculture, leading to adverse impacts on the environment. Short-termism has prevailed in public policy. In the long term, impacts have not been considered at the policy formulation stage. The concept of disaster management cycle is expected to impart the much needed long term perspective viability to development policy, since vulnerability reduction would be factored in mainstream planning to reduce costs and response effects when disaster strikes. Also, the process proceeding policy formulation, that is deliberation with involved stakeholders and had citizen groups, is likely to get more particularity and inclusive of disaster related concerns. Stages in disaster management. Disaster management efforts are graded towards disaster risk management. Disaster risk management implies the systematic process of using administration, decisions, organization, operational skills, and capacities to implement policies, strategies, and coping capacities of the society and communities to lessen the impact of natural hazards and related environmental technological disasters. These compromise all forms of relative, including structural and non-structural measures to avoid prevention or to limit mitigation or preparedness for a disaster, to reduce the potential for human, material, or environmental losses caused by hazards, and to ensure that these losses are minimized when disaster strikes. During a disaster, to ensure that needs provisions of victims are met, alleviate and alleviate minimize suffering. After a disaster, to achieve rapid and durable recovery which does not reproduce the original vulnerability conditions. Disaster cycle. This refers to the real-time event of a hazard occurring, affecting the elements of risk. The duration of the element will depend on the type of threat. For example, ground shaking may only occur for a few seconds during an earthquake, while flooding may take place over a long period of time. Disasters have tremendous modifying impact on the physical landscape. Within a few minutes, an entire region is reduced to rubble. In the event of an earthquake, a recent tsunami has permanently altered the geography of coastal areas in Sri Lanka, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The impact leads to loss of life and property in affected areas. Losses being directly correlated to the especially in legal informal settlements give way easily and cause large scale losses vulnerability in socio-economic weaker sections of society with women, children, aged and handicapped, mentally infirm, etc. suffer a lot more than their stronger counterparts. Studies have also unearthed a positive correlation between poverty and vulnerability. Shift to medication preparedness planning in India. Risk assessment is a required step for the adoption of adequate and successful disaster reduction, reduction policies and measures. Disaster prevention and preparedness are of primary importance in reducing the need for disaster relief. Disaster prevention and preparedness should be considered integral aspects of development policy and planning at national, regional, bilateral, multilateral, international levels. The development and strengthening of capacities to prevent, reduce, and mitigate disasters is a top priority area to be addressed as to provide a strong basis for follow-up activities in early activities in IDNDR. Early warnings of impending disasters and their effective dissemination are key factors in successful disaster prevention and preparedness. Preventive measures are most effective when they involve to participation at all levels, from the local community through the national government to the regional and international level. Response mechanism in India. In India, there is integrated administrative machinery for management of disasters at the national stage. District and sub-district levels, the primary responsibility of undertaking rescue, relief, and rehabilitation measures is that of the state government. The central government supplements effect the efforts of the state government by the way of physical and financial resources if need arises. The extent necessary of central response assistance depends on the severity and scale of the calamity and the requirements of central assistance of augmented the financial resources at the disposal of the state government. The effort is more in the nature of support to the state government, drawing more the Ministry of Home Affairs official document national policy. Union government's response should be in two ways: policy response provided by the Prime Minister, Cabinet committees, and the Home Affairs and or Agriculture Minister. On conclusion, disaster management encompasses a range of activities which are engaged as a policy cycle involving disaster event response, preparedness, and mitigation in that sequence. In the immediate aftermath of a disaster, search and rescue and immediate immediate relief activities are limited. Long-term risk reduction or mitigation measures include rehabilitation, securing, restoring livelihoods and infrastructure restoration. Later development strategy incorporates lessons learned from the past as safe development practices. This is known as mitigation. In addition, preparedness activities need to be carried out in the sense of instituting detection for reduced disaster losses in failure. Disaster mitigation includes preparedness of disaster management plans, pre-positioning of equipment and material, and practice and drills of response procedure. The cycle is a visual depiction of activities in disaster management and the logical logical consequence of the instance and the total disaster risk reduction and management discussed above involves human resource development, hazard mapping, vulnerability and risk assessments, information management systems, communication coordination and funds, among others, are articulated in the regional workshop on TDRM held in Kathmandu on August 9, 2002, organized by the ADRC and OCHA UN. Thank you.